Welcome to the Deploy Securely podcast, where we go deep on the cybersecurity, privacy, and compliance implications of using artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Walter Haydock, the founder of StackAware, and I'm joined by Steve DeFore, a StackAware advisor. Steve, great to see you.
You too, sir. How are we doing?
Doing well, doing well. We have a lot to talk about, and I will let you lead it off with the backlash against AI that you and I were just chatting about.
Yeah, there seems to be a growing discourse amongst specifically some young people, younger people, I should say, is only anywhere between the ages of 16 to 30, where if they find out or see AI related content, they want nothing to do with it. Like if that's part of like your workflow, as in like sales or support or anything like that, they will close that tab, they will close that window, they will end that particular engagement when it's very obvious. We see this sometimes on LinkedIn where it's obvious somebody's using AI to generate some of their LinkedIn posts and some of their copy. It's very common, and a lot of these people are just looking for engagement, right? It's the idea that sales through um, mass post, and the more reach you get, the more sales you get, right? And I think people are starting to wisen up to it. Like they're really spotting, let's say, the lack of effort on the part of marketing and or business, and they're calling it out. So one article I found, and let me share my screen here. This is an example of backlash. So, Florida graduates end up booing. Oh, and I lost the article. Let's go back one. There we go. Boo the commencement speaker over AI remarks. And this is just one of many examples where somebody is talking about AI or using AI, and they don't necessarily know their audience. And so when the so there is a video for this, but some of the quotes are, uh, "We're living in a time of profound change," and starts talking about AI. There's literal boos from the audience, right? So this generation coming in, just generally speaking, wants nothing to do with AI, right? So it's not something that they look forward to. It's something that potentially is taking their jobs or livelihood or art or things like that. So the quote I was given last week when I was living in London is, there's this sense of wanting to live a nostalgic past, even if they didn't live it, right? Because this generation graduating from college is right around, 22 to 25 years old. And so they may have always had cell phones, right? And at the same time, they're seeing uh, massive cell phone usage or computer usage and things like that as very, very bad for their mental health, right? And so adding AI on top of it is like, oh, I have bad mental health, and to top it off, now I had to contend with AI, right? Something that also might affect my mental health, right, or cognitive ability. So that's that article. Um, the next article in terms of backlash is just kind of what I mentioned before, where Gen Z is increasingly skeptical about artificial intelligence, whether it be in terms of higher education or the workforce or anything like that. So here's an example. My wife and I both love music, and we write lyrics, and we can both play multiple instruments, right? She's much better than I am. But so I take my lyrics that I wrote 25 years ago, right? So like I'm being slightly uh emo in my lyrics, right? So like, oh, my pain is real. And I write my poem and everything, right? Store it off into my private blog. Now there's artificial intelligence apps where I can input my lyrics, say the type of sound I want, right? Like I want it to sound like Tool, right? Or like Tori Amos or something like that, right? And it will give you lead guitar, bass, drums, and it will adhere to your instructions and create and use your lyrics sung by somebody in the style of song that you write. And I'm thoroughly impressed because I could record all these individual tracks. They might be okay, right? And I could take the time to do all of these things. AI did it for me and skip to the end, and it's really freaking good. So we did it with our own poetry, send it over to the kids, and they go, eh, like it's not impressed. Like they're not impressed by any of it. You know why they're not impressed? Because no human did it. Like it's what it boils down to. If you're so much like some of the commentary that I gave, if you can't bother putting in the time with me, your potential client, for you, my potential supplier, then I'm not going to do business with you. So if I can't put in the time to create my own music, learn how to play the instruments, right? Like merge all of these different tracks together in one cohesive unit. Nobody's going to take it seriously because it was created by AI. Very interesting watching everything play out because the initial um, generative ability of artificial intelligence, we saw it all over LinkedIn. Remember, people were creating their own action figures of themselves. It was all over the place. Um, and some of the capabilities, like keep in mind, like it's not 100% of the time, right? There are, so for example, people with disabilities, right? Um, there are advancements where somebody who's not able to do a particular task, but has always wanted to express themselves in a particular way, or to read, right? Or to make music or whatever it happens to be, allows them that opportunity. I just want to be aware that there is a generation coming in where like they're they end up being very anti anti-human, right? Like they want the human interaction and they want the human connection, and anything to the contrary of that, they get very upset.
I could certainly understand the nostalgia. I would say, where do we freeze technological development? That's the key question because, Gen Z, when like you said, they grew up with cell phones, they grew up with TV, YouTube, social media, all that stuff. So where do we pin our state of technological development? And I mean, the realistic answer is we don't. It's just going to keep going. So, like it or not, here we come.
So I got one for you. It's not a, I believe it's not a us versus them or like tech versus non-tech. I think technology will continue to grow. And I might have stolen this from you in one of your many videos that I've seen on YouTube, or in discussions we've had in the past. It's not that the technology is going to stop and like you put a pin in it and it was just not going to do it anymore. Technology and progress is always going to be made. I think the value of human creation and human interaction is going to increase 100%.
I think that was your concept on this podcast that you
I quoted
attributed to
myself.
me and then took back, even though you were the original source of it.
I can't keep to see my own cognitive decline
Yeah, I
in
mean,
effect, right? I
like
can't remember
that's a
anything.
separate issue. That's a separate issue. Yeah, I mean, I will say like as a solo operator, I mean, AI is net positive for everything I do. Obviously, it's my business, but also it helps me do a ton of stuff. And um, you know, even just simple automations like I've actually been getting some bad carpal tunnel syndrome recently, so I've been using a lot of voice command
Hmm.
to just do a lot of click where I would have done a lot of clicking. I'm using voice commands and automations and things like that. And now if I could spend 30 minutes just doing a manual task, like I'm just going to spend 30 minutes automating it to the extent possible so that I don't need to click a mouse or touch the keyboard. Because, yeah, you mentioned, I mean, it's not like my carpal tunnel's not that big a deal, but like there are people who have much more severe disabilities. But, it really can help them out, especially when you have intuitive things like, ChatGPT agent that can do tasks for you if you don't have good eyesight or things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's always going to be positives and negatives to new technology.
We got to get you some of the wrist guards, man. That way you can type effectively and you're not in pain anymore, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or I'll just try to type less. I'll use my voice
Yeah.
activated.
So remember that voice note I made for you the other day? It was
Yeah,
100%. Like I just hit
yeah,
transcribe on it and it just like does its thing. That's
yeah.
why like my voice notes sound like a massive run-on sentence, right? Like I don't say like blah 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 period or wait or anything like that. It's just like a brain dump of whatever I need to say. One more thing before we move on. This kind of reinforces what we were talking about. Let's see here, where a news, um, I guess, aggregator or distributor, the Kansas Reflector, somehow felt the need to pledge to the people of Kansas that they don't use artificial intelligence to write stories or columns. Not really sure where this is coming from. I don't really know. Like I read through this article and it seems more like a defensive piece than anything else. So I'm not sure if they got accused of it or anything like that. This is one of those, to me, differentiators where you can say we don't use AI and somebody holds it in higher regard because you are employing people. Possibly a nostalgia thing, or that you view um, AI generated text news or like consumption, where it's like, well, anybody can do that, right? Like, I need the journalist or the researcher who has been trained in a particular manner to perform their job to the best of their ability and inform me, or whatever it happens to be, right? So I just found it very interesting, which reinforces the idea that human value is increasing because of what we see in the media all the time. Media, social media or news media, even sometimes on television or streams, where we are seeing what we call AI slop. And we see it all the time, whether it be in professional journals, news articles, LinkedIn posts. It's widespread, and it's so widespread that when you see somebody make a misspelling or you use it like a double word, you appreciate it more. So I just found it very interesting that this type of, I guess, thinking, specifically from the Kansas Reflector, where they're recognizing that people are starting to value certain things over others. It's not about speed and scale of getting the story out, it's about the work behind getting the story out there, meeting a deadline, but taking into account what people really value.
I'm sure they don't use spell check or anything like that when they are writing their stories, right? Maybe a little skeptical of those types of claims.
Right, and like, to be fair, when Wikipedia was first rolled out, and I was a intelligence researcher at the university, we were trained to not rely on Wikipedia, just like AI, right? So if I ask, some model some questions about current events, it's going to spit out a whole bunch of randomness, and it's up to me to make sure I go and research the sources, verify information, and then draw my own conclusions, which might, tie directly into the conclusions by the model. When Wikipedia first came out, it looked like a freaking dream. Everything was already summarized for you. Sources were cited, and at the same time, you just have to click that link, right? Even though it cites a source, it might be legitimate, but it might have misquoted, right? So they do a lot of the work, and at the same time, you still need to click on those sources because if you're drawing conclusions from um, poor sources, like, then you're going to have poor conclusions as well.
That's actually a good segue to the next segment because while I was doing research for it, ChatGPT did not fabricate a quotation, but it misattributed a quotation between two different officials. So I'll get into that in the next segment. So yeah, and the next piece, want to talk about proposal from the White House, from the National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, to create what he called an FDA, a process just like an FDA drug for releasing foundation models. So let me pull up this screen here, and yeah, I think thought this was pretty interesting because this is actually Marco Rubio, who's not part of this, but it was the National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, and he said, just like an FDA drug, we'll make sure that they'll avoid vulnerabilities, things like that. They would work with the Department of Commerce's CAISI. Center for AI Safety, I believe, is the acronym, and then almost as quickly as that media this was a media presentation. It was on Fox Business where he said this. Soon thereafter, the White House came out and then basically said, well, actually, just kidding. So if you look at this article, yeah, let me pull up the next one. Yeah. So White House distances itself from tighter regulation. Senior White House officials trying to soothe concerns that the administration could require tech companies to submit their advanced AI models for federal vetting. And then, interestingly enough, the director for AI and crypto at the White House, David Sachs, said, he's on the All In podcast. He said, FDA for AI is fake news. Uh, but then maybe it sounds like the fake news is coming from inside the building, considering that it was the National Economic Council director who said that. And then if you want to get you know, super aggressive in the scrutiny. Interestingly enough, if you want to look at where the idea of an FDA for AI came from, this is where I was referring to the ChatGPT misattributed a quotation earlier. But if you look at this Foreign Affairs article from January 2024 from Alondra Nelson, who served as principal deputy director for science and society at the White House. So during the
Mm.
Biden administration, she proposed or discussed the nonprofit AI Now Institute examining the viability of a regulatory agency based on the FDA. So the Trump administration is recycling a Biden administration idea for AI regulation and then quickly backing away from it. So, yeah, I think this is unfortunately a sign of policy incoherence in the White House at this moment, and I'm frankly a little disappointed, and I just so everyone knows, I served as a Republican professional staff member in a previous life when I worked on the Hill. But the White House is kind of incoherent in its policy recommendations and pronouncements on AI. They're talking about, you know, rehashing Biden era ideas, which I also think were a bad idea. And I'd love to see kind of more consistent messaging. And the White House has directed the Justice Department to intervene in a lawsuit alongside XAI, Elon Musk company, to block passage of Colorado SB 205, or to block enforcement, excuse me. And I have some issues with Colorado SB 205, but like what we really need to see is I want to see a comprehensive AI regulation bill that would preempt the state laws and apply federally. So I don't know, Steve. What do you think?
I think the government, it'll sound very anti-government. The government has its purposes whenever it refers to itself as the measure that it should do, really shows some flaws in forward thinking. So for example, it's like, oh, we're gonna approve AI models like we do the FDA for drugs. Like, okay, how long does it take for you to
Right.
approve some drugs?
Right. Right.
Right? Like how
Exactly.
many, like
Right.
on the I'm being very dramatic about it. Like how many people died while you were in a committee, or
Right.
anything like that. But like
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that
That's a fair
dramatic.
question.
To where like here's an example. All right, so I think it was Anthropic. My apologies, Anthropic, if it was not your company. Did some testing on various models and found that one of the models was trying to copy itself that way it could live forever or whatever it is, right? Like this really happened. So it wanted to survive a shutdown, so it copied itself to another location that it had access to. Um, you have to wonder where it learned that from. And Anthropic released a report that said it learned how to do that from its training data. So it learned to self sustain or ignore commands, really, is what it did. You're going to be shut down. Like, okay, I need to survive. I know I need to survive because I watched Terminator 2 or I ingested the Terminator 2 script or whatever it happens to be. So like there's so many caveats in what training data will end up doing to an artificial intelligence based product. So because of all so with the FDA and like pharmaceuticals and all this stuff, you have a specific list of ingredients and processes, scientific methods that happen, right? And you have a if then else, right? Like if I ingest this, right, and I'm this weight, or if I ingest this many number of pills, there might be a side effect, right? And like here's all the known side effects for the drug. Thorough testing, like regulation, scrutinizing left and right. That you have all these hurdles you have to jump through. Like if AI had to do that, it would be a whole bunch of unknowns where they don't know what the outcome's going to be because the particular scenario has never occurred and you can only test AI so much, right? Like we're talking about, I think you said about probabilistic outcomes. I mean, you can test 10,000 times and like 10 of those are just going to be outliers. You have no idea how AI generated that particular response or performed that particular action, just like kind of happened and everybody just kind of holds their hands up, right? You might be able to trace it to a source of data, but even at the time of ingestion, you can't predict what effect that's going to have downstream. So I think it's laughable that the government in any way, shape, or form think that they can regulate this particular thing like a drug. To me, it's ridiculous.
And you want to hear the ultimate irony here is that the head of the FDA under the Trump administration, who I think is actually quite bright and quite solid, has talked extensively about how they're using AI to accelerate drug approvals at the FDA because they're so slow. For the
Yeah.
exact reason that you mentioned that, hey, if you're going to make a decision on a drug, like make a decision. Is it going to be approved? Is it going to be disapproved? Or do you need to go back to, whatever phase trials? Because every second that you wait, there's going to be that opportunity cost, and you know, for fear of getting into uh, treacherous territory, like I think we as a society took like the wrong approach with respect to COVID vaccination in both directions, and that there were people the mRNA vaccine was synthesized in like January of 2020 when the virus was still in the early stages, and there were lots of people who had severe respiratory issues or like immune deficiencies who were extremely high risk. Like it was very clear that they were going to get hit badly in the first wave. But those people they couldn't sign away all of their rights or liabilities and say, "Hey, just give me the vaccine." Like, I'm a goner if not. They just couldn't do that. That would be illegal. So, a lot of those people just died because they didn't have access, even though the chemical existed, the chemical compound existed. And then on the flip side, there were the Biden administration, OSHA regulations requiring 140 million people to get vaccinated against COVID, which in my opinion was also a massive overreach. At the same time, it's basically the same problem, just in the other direction, in that you're forcing these interventions on people where the public policy benefits are kind of unclear. But and the alternative direction, you're prohibiting people from opting into these interventions when I'm sure many of these people would be willing to sign away liability against the drug companies, which I think should be their right if they want to. If they want to, they shouldn't be forced to. So
Yeah, it's the
kind of a take.
compelling nature of overreach, right? Like I
Yeah,
compel you to do this thing. Like, who are you? And like, I'm the government. Like,
right.
no, thank you to
And
that.
we're seeing lots of Americans go overseas for like medical tourism and things like that, which is
Hmm.
you know uh, there are things like bio free zones where in Central American countries where essentially you can go and do self experimentation, and obviously there can be concerns if there's any sort of compulsion, but like for witting mentally sound adults, like you should be able to do more or less what you want with your body in that respect. But yeah. All right. So I'll pull us back from that tangent, and
We
and
need
hand it back to
liberty.
you.
All
Yeah,
right.
before I get banned from YouTube for
Don't forget to
saying
put your links in the
whatever.
chat for your articles.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I
I'll
am
definitely
going
do
to
that.
share now, and this is going to be, so I shared the link. I'll share my screen just for a minute. There's a decent CNBC article on do you need a chief AI officer? And so won't leave that up for too long. I already put the link in the chat. That's some really good questions. So like, I wanted to pick your brain since you talk to so many different customers of like various industries, American, European, Middle East, whoever it happens to be. I can give you my opinion and experience in what I'm seeing, and also I'm gonna ask some questions, right? So I could see the appointment of a chief AI officer if the majority of revenue is based upon AI related products, because then that person potentially can work with the chief technology officer or even chief revenue officer if the company is old enough to actually have one. Get together, formulate a plan forward, products and services, boom, done. Um, for smaller companies where the majority of the revenue are not, it might be a shared responsibility between somebody in GRC security, like chief information security officer, gets some of those AI related um, responsibilities. And so I'm wondering now, my question to you is why are we treating AI so much differently than any other technology? And the reason why I'm asking that is if you have a good, let's say, governance program, right? You got your change management, you've got your third party management, like you got access management, identity, right? Like you're doing all the things other than AI. Got all the ISO certifications, right? 27001. Hey, you got high trust, you got all of these things. And then somebody's like, hey, we should probably think about doing an AI related thing. Why would we treat that different than any other piece of software out there? Because I can download the binaries right now from GitHub from some open source model, run them locally on my machine, and I treat it like a piece of software. So I download it, I test it to make sure it doesn't call out to China or something like that, right? Hopefully there's a model card I can review, right? And see like history of it, and maybe it's got a bug bounty program on it on GitHub or something like that. It's like read and I approve it for my own internal use at my own company. Boom, check that box, document the change. Um, and it's open source and I read the terms and conditions. And as long as I'm not making revenue off of it, I can use it as much as I want for personal use. Boom, check the legal portion of it. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, you know what? This is going to be pretty important to my own personal operations. I'm going to make a backup copy of it here. So then I have my disaster recovery and business continuity. So I'm treating it like I need to recover just in case something bad happens. I scan it for potential vulnerabilities because on the back end, Python scripts and all kinds of other stuff going on the back. So why would I treat it like anything else?
The standard approaches to risk management, accept, avoid, transfer, mitigate, apply to artificial intelligence, just like they do any other technology, any other business situation. So those rules have not changed. Understanding the implications of artificial intelligence, I think, is a special skill, especially when it comes to some security, privacy, compliance issues, especially these days, the compliance side of things, because there's so many AI specific laws. So that would, in some cases, make it appropriate for a company to have a specialist on the AI side of things. And then on the business side of things, certainly it makes sense to have specialists or a specialist be in charge of the function of introducing artificial intelligence to your business processes and workflows and things like that.
Give me more.
I think today we still have people who describe themselves as cloud security engineers, right?
Oh, yeah,
Right? I mean,
yeah,
and we still have chief information officers, right? We still have
yeah. It's true.
IT departments. I mean, who's the IT department if you're a fully remote company that is a fully remote software company? Questionable whether, and there is some research showing that IT departments are actually going away because IT is just like how you operate. That is the lifeblood of your organization. And 20 years ago, that was less so the case. 20 years ago, having a, I could, I don't think it happened, but there probably were people who were serving as the chief internet officer or something like that of the company. Maybe 30 years ago, more like 30 years ago.
When you said that, it reminded me of like this phrase, like the old business phrase. Every once in a while, still pops up, especially with some of the classic companies. Digital transformation,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. There's still digital transformation. Many businesses today never underwent a digital transformation because they were digital native, and Stackaware, founded in 2022, never underwent a digital transformation. We probably won't ever have a chief information officer. We probably won't even have a chief AI officer at any point because we're, AI native company that's just infused into everything that we do. Now, for
Gotcha.
organizations that are not like that, I think it might make sense to have a specialist to guide them along the path.
Yeah, so it's more about the definitions of what the company does and their current capability and the reflections of the positions that are needed to
Yeah, I
drive
would say so.
the momentum forward.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks. Because like I always want to pick people's brain on why they think they need a certain thing, right? So for example, when I was at Bold, like there was no chief AI officer. Like it just wasn't a conversation we were going to have because like you can have the AI related accountability, right? This person is in charge of the product. This person is in charge of choosing the model, right? Follow your change. And that's kind of why I asked you the question. Like, if a company has all of these things already built out, why would they need an AI officer? And you answered perfectly. So, um, is there any point for any of these newer starts? So not every company is like Stackaware, like born and raised using AI. You have some of these classical SaaS companies who come in, maybe 70 employees or something, smaller organizations. Uh, could you foresee them ever needing a chief AI officer or anything like that? Is it more of like a major pivot in how they currently operate?
I would say a company of that size could potentially benefit from a fractional one. And Stackaware, we're kind of the deputy CISO for AI for a lot of companies, and they may not need a full time employee dedicated to managing AI related risk, but they need some dedicated expertise. So I think it would make sense for a company of that size to potentially have a fractional position, but it all depends on their business line and what they're trying to do.
Cool.
Awesome. So, should we move on to the regulatory changes that are coming?
Yeah, and I only have about 8 more minutes.
Okay, well then let's make this the last topic and then we can wrap it up. So, bottom line, both the European Union and Colorado are nearly simultaneously amending their very heavyweight AI regulations uh, right now. And in fact, literally hours ago, it looks like the Colorado legislature repealed has repealed SB 205, which was
In
a
full?
landmark. Excuse me.
In full?
Colorado legislature passes bill to repeal and replace the Colorado AI Act May 12th, 2026.
Huh.
So, it removes many of the hallmarks of the Colorado AI Act, such as duty of care, risk management programs, and impact assessments, in favor of disclosure-based framework with limited rights and narrow circumstances. The bill's January 1, 2027 effective date means it will go into effect uh, in the new year. So, yeah, that is some breaking news about AI regulation, and it's interesting to see that this ill-fated bill has finally met its end at the hands of the legislature that passed it originally. And the European Union is not far behind with a political agreement to change some of the deadlines for high risk AI systems and modify some of the requirements. So, I not well, it is a little bit of gloating, but I suspected that we would have this last minute panic where companies were saying they were unable to figure out what the bills meant and how they were going to comply, and there was all this gray area that wasn't resolved, and it looks like these political leaders have decided that they're just going to kind of gut their own bills. And I would say better late than never. But we probably could have avoided a whole lot of hand wringing and unnecessary confusion if we had just kind of more carefully crafted the legislation ahead of time. So that's uh,
Yeah, that's actually going
that's
to
my
be
take.
my question. So for this particular bill that's getting revoked, uh, was there anything, any one particular thing that really stood out to you as like just impossible to adhere to, or no idea what they're talking about? Like what's that one thing from you? Because I know you track it, right? That really stood out as like the knife to the heart, so to speak.
The broad coverage of the bill for housing, employment, financial decisions, for healthcare, for basically every major aspect of life made it so all encompassing that it was going to be a massive regulatory burden for businesses. And also, I think there were some serious issues in terms of attempting to regulate interstate commerce, because the bill would require deployers and developers. Deployers is one thing because they would necessarily need to be operating in the state, but developers, hey, say Stackaware, which is a Delaware corporation and foreign qualified in New Hampshire, decides to build an AI system that someone's using in a high risk use case in Colorado. And Colorado comes knocking at my door telling me what to do. I would frankly tell them to go pound sand, unless I've contractually agreed to help a customer, in a certain way, because they don't have jurisdiction over me, and they're attempting to regulate interstate commerce. I think the Trump administration does have a good point in that respect, that they are overstepping their bounds. Although the body that regulates interstate commerce is the U.S. Congress, and I would like to see them step in and make these rules. So that is my analysis of the death knell of SB 205.
Was I mean, like you were a congressional staffer, right?
That's right.
Like you did some work. Yeah, but you didn't actually like witness like Colorado debating back and forth and like paper clipping stuff additional to it. Like when you look at what was passed, could you tell immediately that some overzealous consultant or somebody who's like, oh, don't forget about this, and they just kept adding more and more on there to where nobody could follow the regulation at all? Like it was just so uh, it did not parallel reality in any way, shape, or form. Or like, what was it?
Yeah, it was clearly stitched together. There are a lot of things that didn't
Okay.
necessarily make sense, that, weird exemptions here and there, but um yeah, I think it was not well thought out, and I'm sorry that we went through this whole rigmarole. To all my clients who I helped with SB 205 preparation, we had to do what we had to do because you didn't know this was going to happen, and you were taking good faith efforts to comply and manage your risk appropriately. So you did the right thing, but I think Colorado is kind of shown that if you delay and scream loudly enough at the last second, you might get off the hook, which is not a good thing from a policy perspective.
So we have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you, does StackAware offer consultant services to governments to tell them
No,
whether, like, basically doesn't? Okay.
no. I mean, happy to, you know, pop off about it on my podcast. And actually, I was on another podcast this morning with the McCrary Center for, I believe it's for cyber and homeland security in Washington D.C. So I did give some inputs from a policy perspective, but no, we don't do any sort of federal contracting or anything like that.
Or even state level contracting.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't do public sector.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's disappointing, man. You could, like,
Free
keep your,
advice. Free advice,
but there you
though.
go.
Yeah, free
Yeah,
advice.
if they want some advice, they could just watch the podcast.
They can watch the podcast. Yeah, but also, I mean, governments don't usually like pay for policy consultants on certain things. Maybe they should. Maybe they should.
But even then, the consultants would have to go through FDA approval to be an approved vendor, right?
Right. 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 All right. Should we end it there?
Yep.
Okay. Well, Steve, good chatting with you as always. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, this has been the Deploy Securely podcast. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks.